The sound of the slap echoed across the weapon's qualification range like a gunshot. 83 pairs of eyes turned toward the small woman who had just hit the concrete floor. Her cheek burned red, the handprint already forming across pale skin. Her technician's cap tumbled away, rolling to a stop against an ammunition crate. Staff Sergeant Vandal Cross stood over her, his hand still raised, palm open. 6'2" of muscle and ego wrapped in a ranger instructor's uniform. The morning sun caught the combat patch on his shoulder, the one he wore like a medal despite never having earned it in actual combat. His shadow fell across the woman at his feet like a judgment. "I asked you one last time," his voice carried across the training yard, designed to humiliate, designed to break. "Give me the weapon." The woman, Kira Thorne, according to the name tape on her maintenance uniform, slowly pushed herself up from the ground. She said nothing, just quietly picked up her cap, dusted it off with deliberate care, and placed it back on her head. Her movements were measured, controlled, carrying a precision that seemed almost mechanical. 29 years old, 4 years working in the shadows of Fort Bragg's inter-service training complex. 4 years of being invisible, 4 years of silence. For just a fraction of a second, as she stood, her eyes flashed with something that made the air itself seem to hold its breath. Not anger, not fear, something far more dangerous. The look of a predator choosing not to hunt, a warrior choosing not to destroy. Then it was gone, replaced by the blank compliance of someone who'd learned that invisibility was survival. "Can't talk?" Vandal laughed, turning to the crowd of rangers watching the scene unfold. "See this? This is why women don't belong here. Can't even inspect a rifle properly." Laughter rippled through the training yard. Not the full-throated kind, the nervous laughter of young men desperate to belong. Desperate to prove themselves by joining in the humiliation of someone smaller, weaker, someone who couldn't fight back. Kira remained silent, but something in her eyes made Master Sergeant Isaac Calloway, standing in the far corner, pause mid-step. He narrowed his gaze, studying the way she stood. Shoulders open, center of gravity low, hands relaxed at her sides but ready, weight distributed in a way that would allow instant movement in any direction. That stance, he'd seen it before, in places where even rangers weren't cleared to set foot. Isaac was 62 years old, his face weathered by 38 years of service and secrets that would never be written in history books. Desert Storm, 1991, SEAL Liaison Officer. He'd extracted operators from places that didn't exist on official maps, places where one wrong move meant death, and the right moves were never acknowledged. He knew what trained warriors looked like when they tried to blend into ordinary spaces. And this woman, this supposedly ordinary maintenance technician, stood like someone who had learned to be still in ways that most people never would. The kind of stillness that came from understanding violence so deeply, so intimately, that you didn't need to announce it. The stillness of a blade that knew its edge without needing to cut. Colonel Raymond Hartford emerged from the command building, conducting his routine inspection. 64 years of service had taught him to read situations before they exploded. He stopped when he saw the scene before him. His weathered face, marked by classified operations that spanned 3 decades, revealed nothing. But his eyes, those pale blue eyes that had witnessed missions the world would never know about, locked onto Kira with an intensity that spoke of recognition, of knowledge kept deliberately hidden, of secrets that had been protected for 4 years, waiting for exactly this moment. "What's going on here?" His voice cut through the morning air with the authority of a man who'd commanded soldiers in places that didn't exist on official maps. Places where orders came without paper trails and success was measured in lives saved, not medals earned. Vandal spun around, his face still flushed with anger and something else. Something darker. The kind of rage that came from insecurity dressed in authority's clothing. "Sir, this technician is refusing to release weapons to my unit. She's delaying our entire training schedule. Claims there's a defect in the firing mechanism, but I've inspected it myself. There's nothing wrong with it. Hartford looked at Kira, then at the M4 carbine in her hands. His eyes tracked to the weapon's chamber, to the way her fingers rested near the bolt catch. Professional. Familiar. The touch of someone who knew weapons the way musicians knew instruments. For just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Knowledge. Understanding. A secret shared across the distance between them, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the neutral expression of a commanding officer dealing with a routine matter. "Handle it, Staff Sergeant." Vandal grinned, the expression predatory, triumphant. "Yes, sir." He stepped toward Kira, fists clenched, shoulders squared in a posture designed to intimidate. But in the next 20 minutes, everything he believed about himself, everything he thought he knew about strength and weakness, about warriors and civilians, about who deserved respect and who existed merely to serve, would crumble to dust. The training yard at Joint Tactical Training Complex, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, buzzed with the controlled chaos of an inter-service combat readiness evaluation. Over 80 personnel from Army Rangers, Marine Force Recon, and various support units had gathered for what was supposed to be a routine qualification day. The kind of day that happened dozens of times each year. Predictable, measured, safe. The humidity hung thick in the air, mixing with gun oil and testosterone, creating an atmosphere that was part gymnasium, part proving ground. The scent of cordite from the morning's first qualification rounds lingered like incense in a church of violence. Kira returned to her workstation without a word. Her movements remained measured and deliberate as she continued inspecting the rack of M4 carbines awaiting distribution. Her fingers moved across each weapon with a precision that seemed almost supernatural. Checking chambers with the lightest touch, testing trigger assemblies with pressure so exact it could measure tension to the ounce, examining firing pins under the harsh fluorescent lights of the armory alcove, reading the microscopic wear patterns that spoke of hundreds of rounds fired, thousands of cycles completed. Each inspection took exactly 47 seconds, not 46, not 48, exactly 47 seconds per weapon. The consistency was almost mechanical, almost inhuman. The kind of precision that came from performing the same task thousands of times until it became less like work and more like breathing, until your hands knew the path without your mind directing them, until the weapon became an extension of yourself and you could read its history like a book written in metal and carbon. Vandal watched her retreat with barely concealed contempt. He turned to his group of rangers, voice pitched to carry across the yard, to make sure every person within earshot understood his displeasure. 20 minutes behind schedule because some grease monkey thinks she knows weapons better than soldiers who actually use them. Because some diversity hire thinks she can tell rangers how to do their jobs. The words were calculated, designed to wound, designed to put her back in what he considered her proper place. Sergeant Morgan Sullivan materialized at the adjacent supply station. Her red hair caught the morning light like copper wire. She'd been watching the confrontation with growing concern, her hands gripping a clipboard like it might anchor her to something solid in a world that had suddenly tilted wrong. Morgan had been in the Army long enough to recognize the difference between someone who was beaten and someone who was choosing not to fight. She'd seen it before. In soldiers who'd come back from places they couldn't talk about, doing jobs they'd never acknowledge. The way they moved, the way they watched, the way they existed in spaces as if always calculating angles and exits. As if their bodies were weapons they temporarily holstered but could draw in an instant if circumstances demanded. She approached Kira as the confrontation temporarily dispersed, the crowd moving toward the shooting lanes for the morning's first qualification round. "Hey, you okay?" Kira looked up. For just a moment, something human flickered behind her guarded expression. Recognition of kindness in a place that had offered precious little. A crack in the armor she'd worn for 4 years. "I'm fine, Sergeant Sullivan." Morgan, We've been over this a dozen times. She leaned against the workbench, keeping her voice low, creating a bubble of privacy in the public space. You should report him. That was assault. Clear as day. There were 83 witnesses. His career would be over by sunset. He's got connections. Kira resumed her inspection of the weapon rack, her movements never faltering, never showing the emotional impact of Morgan's words. Friends in high places. I've seen his type before. They always have protection. They always land on their feet, while the people who report them end up transferred to some backwater assignment where they can't cause trouble. Morgan studied her colleague's profile, noting the faint scar that traced along her jawline, disappearing behind her ear. The kind of scar that didn't come from kitchen accidents or automotive mishaps. The kind that came from violence survived and healed. A blade, probably, something sharp enough to cut clean, wielded by someone who knew how to use it. She noted the calluses on Kira's hands, too. Too thick for someone who just cleaned weapons. These were the calluses of someone who'd fired thousands of rounds, who'd done countless push-ups and pull-ups, who'd spent years gripping things designed to deliver violence at range. The hands of a professional. And the way her eyes constantly scanned the environment, even while her hands worked. Tracking movement, assessing threats, maintaining awareness of every person within 30 feet, every door, every window, every possible avenue of approach or retreat. The kind of situational awareness that couldn't be taught in a classroom, that only came from operating in environments where a moment's inattention meant death. Where'd you serve? The question hung in the air, loaded with implications. With the understanding that Morgan had seen through the cover story, had recognized what Kira was trying to hide. Kira was quiet for a beat too long, the kind of pause that confirmed suspicions more than any words could. I'm just a technician, started 4 years ago, nothing special. Applied through the normal channels, got hired, been here ever since. Routine work, boring mostly. But Morgan had been a supply NCO for 12 years. She knew how to read people, how to spot the things they tried to hide, the inconsistencies in their stories, the gaps in their timelines, the moments when their carefully constructed facades slipped just enough to reveal the truth beneath. And everything about Kira Thorne screamed that nothing special was the biggest lie she'd ever heard. The morning progressed with the grinding efficiency of military routine. Trainees cycled through the qualification lanes in groups of 8. Their rifle reports created a staccato rhythm that echoed off the concrete barriers, a percussion of violence made safe through distance and control. Vandal prowled the firing line like a predator, his voice a constant bark of criticism and condescension. Finding fault with stance, with grip, with breathing, demanding perfection while offering nothing but abuse. Using his authority like a blunt instrument to shape young soldiers through fear rather than understanding. Kira worked in the background, invisible to most, essential to all. She cleared jammed weapons with touches so efficient they seemed like magic, replaced worn components before anyone noticed the degradation, ensured that every trainee who stepped up to the line had a functioning rifle in their hands, a weapon that wouldn't fail them when they needed it most. Her movements were efficient, almost choreographed, each motion flowing into the next with a precision that seemed unconscious. The product of repetition burned so deep it had become instinct. Muscle memory developed over thousands of hours until her body knew the path even when her mind was elsewhere. Corporal Jesse Graves stood at lane 7, his hands trembling so badly the M4 shook in his grip like a leaf in a windstorm. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the morning's relative cool. His breathing came in short, sharp gasps that had nothing to do with physical exertion, the hyperventilation of someone trapped in a memory they couldn't escape. 20 years old, and already carrying ghosts that would follow him for the rest of his life. His eyes had the 1,000-yard stare of someone who'd seen things that didn't fit in the neat boxes the civilian world demanded. the son of a Gulf War veteran who'd never made it home whole, following in footsteps that led through darkness toward an end his father had found with a bottle of pills and a note that said, "I'm sorry," but offered no explanation. Kira noticed. Of course she noticed. She sat down the rifle she was cleaning and made her way to his station. Her approach so quiet, so controlled, that he didn't hear her until she spoke. "Square your shoulders." Jesse flinched, nearly dropped his weapon. His finger went dangerously close to the trigger. Muscle memory from some other place, some other time, trying to take over. The kind of instinctive response that spoke of training under fire, of moments when hesitation meant death. Easy. Her voice was low, meant only for him. Gentle without being condescending. The tone of someone who understood rather than someone who pitied. Keep your finger indexed along the receiver. Good. Now take a breath. Hold it. Let half out. Feel your heartbeat slow. That's the rhythm. That's the tempo you're looking for. His breathing steadied, almost against his will. The trembling in his hands decreased by measurable degrees. The target isn't the enemy. She adjusted his elbow position with a gentle touch. The kind of correction that came from understanding, not judgment. It's just a piece of paper. Paper can't hurt you. Paper doesn't shoot back. You're safe here. Right now, in this moment, you're safe. How did you? He couldn't finish the question. Couldn't articulate the confusion, the relief, the sudden understanding that someone else knew. Someone else understood what it was like to have your body betray you, to have your hands shake when you needed them steady, to feel your chest tighten when there was no rational reason for fear. I've seen that look before. She stepped back, giving him space, giving him dignity. You're not alone, Corporal, and it doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. It means you've been places that changed you. And that's not a failing, that's a fact. Before he could respond, before he could ask the questions forming in his mind, Vandal's voice cut across the range like a blade. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Kira turned to face him, her expression neutral, professional, giving him nothing to grasp, nothing to use against her. The mask back in place as quickly as it had slipped. His sight alignment was off. I was making a correction. His sight alignment is my concern. Vandal stepped into her personal space, using his height to intimidate, his physical presence as a weapon. You touch one of my trainees again, and I'll have you scrubbing latrines for a month. I'll have you cleaning grease traps and polishing brass until your hands bleed. Do you understand me? He paused, a cruel smile spreading across his face like an infection. Matter of fact, I think you owe Private Hewitt over there an apology. He's been waiting 15 minutes for his weapon because you're too busy playing instructor. Too busy pretending to be something you're not. Specialist Hewitt appeared at Vandal's shoulder, a smirk spreading across his face like an infection. 25 years old, barely out of advanced training, desperate to prove himself by being cruel to someone who couldn't fight back. The kind of man who measured his worth by how much pain he could inflict on those below him. Maybe she needs a reminder of where she belongs. He shoved a cart of empty magazines toward Kira with enough force to send it careening into her hip. The impact was deliberate, calculated, not enough to cause serious injury, but enough to hurt, enough to humiliate, enough to remind her of her place in the hierarchy he'd constructed in his mind. She stumbled, but didn't fall. Her foot slid back in a lateral pivot, her weight redistributed with fluid grace. Her balance recovered in a fraction of a second. The movement so smooth, so practiced, it seemed almost rehearsed, almost like something drilled into muscle memory through countless repetitions, through training so intensive, so demanding, that it became part of your nervous system. Part of who you were at the most fundamental level. Isaac saw it from 30 yards away. His coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips. His eyes, pale gray and sharper than his 62 years should allow, tracked the movement with analytical precision, breaking it down, analyzing the mechanics, understanding what it meant. That wasn't a stumble recovery. That was a trained response. Specific, deliberate, the kind of thing they drilled into you until it became reflex, until your body responded faster than your conscious mind could process, until you could do it half asleep, injured, under fire. He'd seen that exact movement in one place. During one assignment he wasn't supposed to talk about. Coronado, California, 1992, the place where they made SEALs, where they broke men down and rebuilt them into something harder, something more capable, something that could operate in the darkest places on Earth and come back alive. The place where that specific defensive pivot was drilled 10,000 times until it became as natural as breathing. Oops, Hewitt laughed, not even bothering to pretend it was an accident. His eyes gleamed with the cruelty of someone who'd never faced real consequences, who'd never been held accountable for his actions, who believed that might made right and weakness deserved punishment. Kira said nothing. She simply righted the cart and began organizing the scattered magazines with methodical precision. Each magazine placed with exact spacing, each movement controlled, each breath measured, giving them nothing, no reaction, no emotion, no target for their cruelty to find purchase. Across the training yard, Warrant Officer Jasper Reed was conducting flight certification reviews. The helicopter pilot had 44 years on this earth and 8 years flying extract missions for Tier 1 operators. He'd flown into hot landing zones under fire, had pulled wounded operators from compounds surrounded by hostiles, had seen the best of the best work under impossible conditions, where a single mistake meant everyone died. He knew what excellence looked like when it was trying to hide, and something about the way that technician moved made him stop and watch. When Kira passed his station to retrieve a replacement barrel, he caught her eye, studied her face, noted the way she carried herself, the economy of movement, the constant awareness. "You move well for a maintenance tech." She met his gaze without flinching, without the nervousness most junior personnel showed when addressed by a warrant officer. "Thank you, sir. Where'd you learn to recover balance like that? That lateral pivot when the cart hit you. That's not something people do naturally. That's trained, specific, the kind of movement that takes thousands of repetitions to make automatic." "Lots of practice, sir. This isn't exactly a gentle workplace. You learn to keep your feet or you end up on your back." Reed studied her face, searching for something he couldn't quite name, some confirmation of the suspicion forming in his mind. Then he nodded slowly, filing the interaction away in a mental folder labeled "Questions Without Answers," the kind of folder that grew thick over years of flying classified missions. The morning's first crisis came at 11:47. A trainee at Lane 3, barely 19 and green as grass, had somehow managed to load around while his weapon was pointed away from the range. The kind of mistake that happened when fear and inexperience combined with weapons designed to kill. The sound of the discharge was deafening in the enclosed space, a thunderclap of sudden violence. The bullet punched through the ceiling of the covered firing station, sending chunks of concrete raining down like deadly hail. Fragments that could blind, could maim, could kill if they struck at the right angle with sufficient force. Panic rippled through the trainees like a shockwave. Instructors shouted contradictory orders. "Move back! Stay still! Put your weapon down! Keep your weapon up! Drop the magazine! Keep your hands visible!" The chaos of fear without leadership, of authority fragmenting under unexpected stress. The young soldier stood frozen, weapon still in his trembling hand. The barrel swept dangerously across the crowded range as he turned, trying to understand what had happened, what he'd done, trying to process the reality that he'd nearly killed someone, that he'd lost control of a machine designed to deliver death at the speed of sound. 83 people in the path of a loaded weapon held by someone in the grip of panic. 83 lives balanced on the edge of another negligent discharge. Another round sent spinning toward flesh and bone with no malice, no intent, just the mechanical reality of a trigger pulled and a firing pin dropped. Kira moved. She covered the 15 feet between her station and lane 3 in under 2 seconds. No hesitation, no calculation, no moment of decision where she weighed risk against reward. Just movement, pure and immediate. The kind of response that bypassed conscious thought entirely. Her hand closed over the rifle's barrel, pushing it toward the ground with controlled force, applying exactly enough pressure to redirect without triggering a defensive response from the panicked trainee, while her other hand found the magazine release, pressed it, felt the magazine drop free. Her palm slapped the bolt catch, locking the action open, making the weapon safe through mechanical impossibility rather than trust. She cleared the chamber by touch, her eyes never leaving the terrified trainee's face, maintaining that human connection, letting him see that she wasn't angry, wasn't judging, was simply making the situation safe. "You're okay." Her voice was calm, steady, the eye of the storm, the single point of control in absolute chaos. "Weapons safe. Everyone's safe. Nobody got hurt. You made a mistake. It happens. You're going to learn from it. You're going to be more careful. And you're never going to let it happen again. Breathe." The whole sequence had taken less than 2 seconds. 1.8 seconds, to be precise. From movement to resolution. From potential tragedy to controlled situation. From chaos to order through nothing but skill and will. Silence fell over the range. Not the silence of peace, the silence of shock, of witnessing something that shouldn't have been possible, of seeing someone move with a speed and precision that existed beyond normal human capability. Isaac set down his coffee cup very carefully. His hands, steady as they'd been for 38 years of service, showed the faintest tremor. Beside him, Command Sergeant Major Elijah Grant had gone very still, his dark face taking on an expression of dawning realization, of pieces clicking into place, of a puzzle 4 years in the making suddenly revealing its solution. "Isaac," Grant's voice was barely above a whisper. "Did you see that?" "I saw it. That wasn't basic training. That wasn't even advanced training. That was something else entirely. I know. That was operator-level response time, instinct, muscle memory developed through so much repetition it becomes part of your nervous system. The kind of skill that takes years to develop and never fully leaves you." Grant turned to look at the small woman now helping the shaken trainee sit down on a nearby bench. Her movements gentle and reassuring. Her voice too low to hear, but clearly offering comfort rather than condemnation. "Who the hell is she?" Isaac had no answer, but he intended to find out. He'd spent 6 months in 1991 attached to SEAL teams during Desert Storm reconnaissance operations. He'd seen the best operators in the world work, had watched them move through hostile territory like ghosts, had witnessed them make split-second decisions under fire that meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. He knew what true expertise looked like when stripped of rank and ceremony, when reduced to nothing but skill and will. And what he just witnessed was expertise of the highest order, the kind that only came from years of training at the most elite levels, the kind that marks someone as belonging to a very small, very select group of warriors. Vandal Cross, however, saw only an opportunity to reassert dominance, to reclaim the authority he felt slipping away with every passing moment. He stormed across the range, face purple with rage, each step heavy with barely contained violence, with the fury of someone whose self-image was crumbling and who needed someone to blame. "Who gave you permission to touch that trainee? Who gave you permission to handle a weapon malfunction? You're a technician. You maintain equipment. That's all you are. That's all you'll ever be. You exist to serve us, to support us, not to act like you're one of us." Kira straightened to face him, and for just a moment Isaac thought he saw something flicker in her eyes. Not fear, not anger, something colder, something that looked like calculation, like someone weighing options, considering responses, deciding how much force was appropriate, and how much would be excessive. Then it was gone, replaced by professional neutrality. The weapon was pointed at 34 people, including 3 officers and the base commander. Someone had to act. I was closest. I acted. That's all. For the first time, Vandal registered that Colonel Hartford had been watching from the observation platform. That this wasn't just a confrontation between a staff sergeant and a maintenance tech. That this was being witnessed, documented, remembered. I don't care if it was pointed at the president. Vandal's voice dropped to a dangerous hiss, the kind of quiet that's more threatening than shouting. You do not step outside your lane. Ever. You do not touch trainees. You do not handle weapons. You do not make decisions. You follow orders. Am I clear? Crystal clear, Staff Sergeant. The words were compliant, the tone was not. And everyone within earshot heard the difference, heard the careful control, heard the restraint that suggested reserves of strength still untapped, heard something that sounded almost like pity. Vandal's jaw clenched, his hands balled into fists. He'd been challenged before, but never like this. Never by someone who should have been afraid of him. Never by someone who stood there with perfect military bearing and eyes that suggested she'd seen things that would break him. That she'd been places where his authority meant nothing and survival was the only currency that mattered. You know what? His voice took on a mocking edge. I think we need to settle something here. There's been some confusion about who knows weapons and who just cleans them, about who belongs in a combat unit and who belongs in a support role. He turned to address the crowd that had begun to gather, sensing drama, sensing blood in the water, drawn by the promise of humiliation and spectacle. Disassembly competition. Right now, Specialist Hewitt versus our maintenance expert here. Let's see who really knows their business. Let's find out if she's as good as she seems to think she is. Specialist Hewitt stepped forward, a confident smile on his face. 25 years old, certified armorer with 4 years of experience and an expert rating in 3 weapon platforms. He'd won the last 2 base competitions, held the facility record, had been considering entering regional trials. This would be easy. This would be instructive. This would put the cleaning lady back in her place and restore the natural order of things. I'm game if she is, Hewitt cracked his knuckles theatrically, though I feel like I should warn her. I hold the base record, 43 seconds. That's faster than most armorers can manage, faster than a lot of people think is possible. Murmurs rippled through the assembled personnel. 43 seconds was impressive, professional level, the kind of speed that came from thousands of repetitions and genuine expertise, the kind of time that separated hobbyists from professionals. Kira didn't move from her station, didn't acknowledge the challenge, didn't give Vandal the satisfaction of a response, just continued working, her hands moving across a rifle with that same methodical precision. What's wrong? Vandal's voice carried mockery like a weapon, sharp and designed to wound. Scared? Or did you finally realize you're out of your depth? That you've been pretending to be something you're not? I have work to do, Staff Sergeant. These weapons need to be ready for the afternoon qualification. Soldiers depend on this equipment functioning properly. That's my responsibility. Work can wait. Vandal stepped closer, using his size to intimidate, his presence as a physical threat. This is about respect, about knowing your place, about understanding that there's a hierarchy here and you're at the bottom of it. Unless you want me to tell Colonel Hartford that you're refusing a direct order, that you're insubordinate, that you're creating problems. It wasn't a direct order. Everyone knew it, but the power dynamic was clear, the threat implicit. Refuse and face consequences. Comply and face humiliation. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. Kira set down her tools with careful precision, each implement placed exactly where it belonged, each movement deliberate, creating a moment of transition, of preparation. Then she looked up at Vandal, and for just a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Something that made Isaac Calloway, watching from across the yard, straighten to attention, made his hand unconsciously move toward a salute before he caught himself. Fine. A space was cleared in the center of the training yard. Two M4 carbines were placed on a table, identical in every way. Standard military issue, the kind of weapon every soldier in the facility could disassemble in their sleep. The AR-15 platform that had been America's primary infantry rifle for decades. Familiar, reliable, simple enough in concept but complex enough in execution that speed required genuine skill. Hewitt took his position with the swagger of a man who'd already won, who knew exactly how this would play out. 4 years of daily practice against a cleaning woman who probably barely knew which end the bullets came out of, who'd probably never even fired one of these weapons, except maybe on some basic qualification course years ago. Kira stood opposite, her expression blank, her stance relaxed, her breathing steady, waiting, not preparing, not psyching herself up, just waiting, patient, still, like someone who'd done this so many times that anticipation was meaningless. Standard disassembly and reassembly, Vandal announced, loving every moment of this, savoring the anticipation of her failure, of her public humiliation. First one to present a function-checked weapon wins. Ready? Hewitt nodded, rolling his shoulders, preparing for performance, visualizing the sequence. Hands to pins, pins out, bolt carrier, upper receiver, lower receiver, everything in order, everything by the numbers. Kira said nothing, just waited, patient, still, like a snake before it strikes. Go! Hewitt's hands moved with practiced efficiency, the movements of a man who'd performed this task thousands of times, who'd trained for speed, who'd shaved seconds off his time through repetition and focus. Pins out, bolt carrier group free, trigger assembly separated, upper receiver detached, lower receiver components exposed. His fingers flew, muscle memory taking over. Years of practice paying dividends. Then reassembly, reverse order, everything coming together with practiced precision. Components sliding into place, pins driven home, charging handle racked. 47 seconds. He slapped the charging handle one final time, pointed the weapon at the ground in a safe direction, pulled the trigger with proper finger placement. Click. Function check complete. Done. He looked up, triumph on his face, ready to accept congratulations, ready to watch her struggle and fail. Then he saw where everyone else was looking. Kira stood motionless, her weapon already reassembled, already function checked, resting on the table in front of her. Her eyes were closed, her breathing was slow and even, meditative, and her hands were empty, resting at her sides, the job complete. Time? Someone asked. The word barely more than a whisper, as if speaking louder might break some spell, might reveal this as illusion rather than reality. Isaac checked his watch, though he'd been counting in his head, old habits from desert operations where timing meant the difference between extraction and capture, where being 5 seconds late meant everyone died. 11.4 seconds. The silence was absolute. Not the silence of shock this time, the silence of witnessing something impossible become real, of watching the laws of physics bend, of seeing human capability extended beyond what should be possible. That's impossible, Hewitt breathed, his face gone pale, his hands starting to shake. No one can. I've seen instructors who can't. The world record for competitive speed disassembly is... She didn't even look, someone whispered from the crowd. She did the whole thing with her eyes closed, disassembled it blind, reassembled it blind, function checked it blind, like she'd done it 10,000 times and didn't need to see anymore. Warrant Officer Reed pushed through the assembled soldiers, his weathered face intent. 8 years of flying extract missions for Tier 1 operators had taught him to recognize excellence when he saw it, had taught him the difference between good and extraordinary, between trained and elite. His eyes locked on Kira with an intensity that made nearby soldiers step aside, made them create space for whatever was about to happen. "What's your call sign?" The question cut through the silence like a blade. Not, "What's your name?" or "Where'd you learn that?" Call sign. The question you asked operators, not maintenance techs, the identifier used by people who worked in the shadows, who operated under assumed names, who couldn't use their real identities in communications that might be intercepted. Kira opened her eyes, met his gaze without flinching, without the surprise most people would show at such a question. "I'm just a maintenance technician, sir. I've flown extract missions for Tier 1 operators for 8 years. Reed stepped closer, his voice dropping but somehow carrying further. "I know what BUD/S graduates look like when they handle weapons. I know how they move, how they think, how they exist in the world, the economy of motion, the situational awareness, the casual competence that comes from training so intensive most people can't even imagine it." He paused, studying her face, searching for confirmation of what he already knew. "What is your call sign?" "I don't have one." The lie was smooth, practiced, delivered with perfect sincerity, utterly unconvincing to anyone who knew what to look for. Isaac pulled Command Sergeant Major Grant aside, speaking in urgent whispers that carried more weight than shouting ever could. Words meant for one person, but heard by everyone paying attention. That disassembly time, that level of proficiency, eyes closed, which means muscle memory so deep she doesn't need visual confirmation. There's only one place that produces operators like that. Grant finished the thought, his voice heavy with realization, with understanding that this moment changed everything. "You think she's a SEAL?" "I think she's something." Isaac's gaze swept across the yard to where Colonel Hartford stood watching, his face betraying nothing, his eyes revealing everything to those who knew how to read them. "And I think, whatever it is, it's classified above our pay grade, above most pay grades, the kind of classification that comes with federal penalties for disclosure." Grant looked at Hartford. "He knows." "Look at him." Isaac's voice was flat with certainty. "Hartford knows exactly who she is, has known for 4 years, has been protecting her, keeping her secret, waiting for exactly this moment. Then why isn't he saying anything?" "That," Grant said slowly, "is the interesting question. And I suspect the answer has to do with operations we're not cleared to know about, with missions that don't exist on paper, with secrets that need to stay buried until the right moment." Vandal Cross wasn't finished. The humiliation of watching a cleaning lady outperform his hand-picked armorer demanded retribution, demanded some way to restore the natural order of things, to prove that this was a fluke, an anomaly, something that could be explained away and forgotten, something that didn't fundamentally challenge his understanding of how the world worked. He snatched an M9 Beretta from the nearest rack, ejected the magazine with more force than necessary, cleared the chamber with unnecessary violence, making a show of it, establishing dominance through aggression. Anybody can play with parts when you've memorized the movements, when you've practiced one specific task until you can do it in your sleep. Let's see if you can actually shoot. Let's find out if you know what these weapons are actually for. He thrust the weapon toward Kira, his expression savage with the need to reassert dominance, with the desperation of someone whose identity was crumbling. "Firing range, 50 yards, standard qualification course, right now." Captain Hugo Brennan began. "Staff Sergeant," the training officer finally sensing that this had gone too far, that lines were being crossed that couldn't be uncrossed, that whatever was happening here was spiraling beyond his control. "What? She's already proved she thinks she's better than everyone. Let's give her a chance to prove it. Let's see if she can back up this performance. Or let's expose her as a fraud who got lucky once." Vandal's smile was cruel, predatory, the expression of someone who thought they'd found a way to win, to restore order, to prove that the world still made sense. Unless she wants to admit she's just a parts monkey who got lucky, that she's been pretending to be something she's not, that she doesn't belong here. Kira looked at the Beretta in his outstretched hand. For a long moment, she didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there weighing something that only she could see, calculating odds and outcomes in ways that the crowd couldn't understand, making decisions based on factors invisible to everyone watching. I'm not qualified for weapons discharge on this facility. I don't have current certification. The paperwork would take weeks. I'll qualify you. Vandal shoved the weapon into her hands with enough force that she had to catch it. Right now, as a training officer, I have the authority. Move. The crowd followed, sensing drama, sensing something building toward a conclusion they couldn't quite predict. By the time they reached the pistol range, nearly 60 people had gathered, words spreading through the base like wildfire. Something's happening, something big, something you don't want to miss. Vandal loaded a fresh magazine, handed it to Kira with exaggerated care, making a show of his generosity, his willingness to give her a fair chance. 15 rounds, 50 yards, standard qualification. Let's see what you've got. Let's find out if you're as good with a pistol as you seem to be with parts. Kira approached the firing line with measured steps. She loaded the magazine, chambered around with proper technique, raised the weapon in a textbook Weaver stance, feet shoulder-width apart, knees slightly bent, weight forward, support hand wrapped around shooting hand, elbows bent at approximately 90 degrees, perfect form. But something was wrong. Her right hand trembled slightly, a barely perceptible vibration that anyone looking closely could see, the kind of shake that suggested nerves, uncertainty, the natural response of someone out of their depth, someone who'd been pushed beyond their capabilities. "What's the matter?" Owen Blake called out, emboldened by Vandal's presence, by the crowd's anticipation. "Scared of a little bang? Afraid the gun might be louder than you expect?" Kira adjusted her grip, steadied her breathing, sighted down the barrel, and fired. The first round hit 6 inches left of the target. Not a miss, exactly, but not good. Not what you'd expect from someone who just demonstrated that level of weapons proficiency. The second went high, 8 inches above center mass. The third was right, but low. By the fifth shot, her grouping was scattered across a 2-foot radius. Not a single round touching center mass. The kind of shooting you'd expect from someone with minimal training. Someone who'd qualified once, years ago, and hadn't touched a weapon since. Laughter erupted from the crowd. Relieved laughter, the natural order restored. The cleaning lady put back in her place, the world making sense again. "This is priceless," Hewitt crowed, his earlier humiliation forgotten in the joy of someone else's failure. In the schadenfreude of watching the mighty fall. "Fastest disassembly I've ever seen. 11.4 seconds, and she can't hit the broadside of a building from 50 feet. Can't do the one thing these weapons are actually designed for." "Technician accuracy," Vandal smirked, satisfaction radiating from him like heat, like vindication. "All theory, no practice. She's memorized the manual. Learned to take apart weapons like she's following instructions from IKEA. But she's never actually used one in anger. Never had to rely on it when it mattered. Maybe stick to what you know, sweetheart. Leave the real work to the professionals." Owen was practically dancing with glee. "Should have stayed in the kitchen where you belong. Should have stuck to typing and filing and making coffee. That's what you're good at. That's where you belong." But Isaac wasn't laughing. His eyes had moved past the 50-yard target, past the laughter and mockery, to the 200-yard marker at the far end of the range, the distant target used for rifle qualification, the one nobody thought to check because nobody shoots at it with a pistol, because it's impossible. His coffee cup slipped from nerveless fingers, hitting the ground with a dull thud that went unnoticed in the general mockery. He sat down heavily on a nearby bench, his legs suddenly unable to support his weight. Holy God! Gunnery Sergeant Tobias Crane followed his gaze and went pale. 58 years old, Marine Scout sniper instructor, Desert Storm veteran with more confirmed kills than he'd ever acknowledge, more lives taken at long range than he could count, more hours spent behind a scope than most people spent in cars. He knew precision when he saw it. He knew the difference between luck and skill, between amateur and master, between someone who could shoot and someone who was a shooter at the deepest level. And what he was looking at made his hands shake. He walked slowly to the 200-yard marker, his boots heavy on the gravel, each step taking him closer to something that shouldn't be possible, to evidence of skill that existed in a category beyond normal human capability. The crowd's laughter began to die as people noticed his movement, noticed the way he'd stopped and stared, noticed the expression on his weathered face, the look of a professional recognizing mastery beyond his own. Crane stood there for a long moment, studying the target, counting holes, measuring distances, confirming what his eyes were telling him, but his mind was struggling to accept. Then he turned back to face the crowd, his voice carrying across the range with the weight of professional acknowledgement, with the respect one warrior offers another. 5 rounds, 200 yards, Pentagon grouping. He paused, letting that sink in, letting everyone understand what they were really looking at, letting the mathematics of it settle in their minds. With iron sights, on a pistol designed for 25-yard maximum effective range, on a weapon that ballistically shouldn't be able to hit anything at 200 yards with any consistency, the bullet drop alone should make it impossible. Another pause. Longer this time, more weighted. I've seen Marine Scout snipers who couldn't make this shot with a rifle, who couldn't group 5 rounds in a pattern the size of a human head at 200 yards, even with magnified optics and a weapon designed for precision at range. She just did it with a sidearm, with a weapon that most people consider effective only inside a room, to prove a point, without saying a word, while making it look like she couldn't shoot at all. The silence that followed was different from before. Not shock, not embarrassment, something deeper. The silence of watching reality reorganize itself, of understanding that everything you thought you knew was wrong, of recognizing that you'd been played, that you'd been watching theater, that the performance had been for your benefit and you'd missed it entirely. She missed, Vandal insisted, but his voice had lost its conviction. The certainty was crumbling, replaced by something that looked like fear, like the dawning understanding that he'd made a terrible mistake. She clearly missed the target right in front of her. We all saw it. Those shots were terrible. She hit exactly what she was aiming at. Isaac stepped forward, positioning himself between Vandal and Kira, his 62 years of experience suddenly carrying an authority that rank alone couldn't convey. The authority of someone who'd seen things, who knew things, who'd earned the right to speak. The question is why she bothered to make it look like she missed it first. Why she chose to demonstrate her skill in a way that lets you save face. That gave you an out. That allowed you to walk away without complete humiliation. Kira ejected the magazine, cleared the chamber, set the weapon down on the bench with careful precision. Her face revealed nothing. No pride, no satisfaction, no emotion at all. The mask back in place. I'm done here. She turned to walk back to her station. I have work to do, weapons to maintain, soldiers to support, my actual job. Hold on. Colonel Raymond Hartford descended from the observation platform, his stride purposeful, commanding, each step carrying the weight of authority earned over 6 decades of service. The crowd parted before him like water before a ship's bow, creating space, showing respect, acknowledging power. 64 years of command presence made manifest. Technician Thorne, a word. Kira stopped, stood at attention, waited. Every movement perfect, every angle correct. The bearing of someone who'd been trained at the highest levels, who'd learned to present themselves with military precision so ingrained it became unconscious. That was quite a demonstration. Hartford's voice was measured, careful, each word chosen with precision. Where did you learn to shoot like that? Where did you develop that level of proficiency? Practice, sir. Lots of practice, years of it, repetition until it became second nature. Practice. Hartford let the word hang in the air, testing its weight, finding it insufficient, a truth that concealed more than it revealed. He turned to where Francis Webb, the civilian contractor, worked at a laptop nearby. The intelligence specialist who handled classified file access, who maintained the digital paper trail that followed everyone with a clearance. Webb, any progress on that file? The contractor looked up, his face troubled.
More than troubled.
Disturbed, like someone who'd seen something they weren't supposed to see, who'd stumbled across a secret that carried weight beyond their clearance level. Sir, I've hit a wall. Her file isn't just locked, it's flagged, compartmentalized beyond normal protocols. Any deeper access attempts trigger an automatic notification to... He trailed off, swallowing hard. Sir, I'm not even authorized to know who gets notified. The system logs my query and sends an alert to an address I can't see, to an organization I can't identify. That's not normal classification. That's something else entirely. Hartford nodded slowly, as if confirming something he'd already suspected, as if pieces of a puzzle he'd been working on for 4 years had finally clicked into place. Very well. Carry on, technician. As Kira walked away, Hartford caught Isaac's eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod, a silent communication between men who'd spent lifetimes learning to speak without words, who'd operated in environments where verbal communication meant death, who'd learned to convey volumes with the slightest gesture. Something was happening here, something that went far beyond a simple personality conflict, something that had been building for 4 years, waiting for exactly the right moment to emerge, for circumstances to align, for the pressure to build until the secret could no longer be contained. And whatever it was about to blow wide open. The afternoon sun had begun its descent when Vandal cornered Kira at her workstation. Most personnel had moved to the mess hall for lunch. The armory area was relatively deserted, the kind of quiet that comes in the middle of a military day when the morning's work is done and the afternoon's hasn't yet begun. Just a handful of witnesses remained, enough to make what happened next a matter of record, but few enough to embolden a man desperate to restore his shattered pride, to reclaim some fragment of the authority he'd lost. You think you're clever, don't you? His voice was low, venomous, the quiet fury of someone who'd lost everything and needed someone to blame. Making me look bad in front of everyone, humiliating me, destroying my reputation, my credibility, everything I built here over 4 years. Kira didn't look up from her work. Her hands continued their methodical inspection of firing pins, each movement precise and controlled, each breath measured. I was just defending myself, Staff Sergeant. You challenged me. I responded. That's all. You were showing off, playing games, demonstrating skills you've been hiding, making me look like a fool, like someone who doesn't know what he's talking about, who doesn't deserve the rank he holds. He leaned closer, close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath, the sweat of exertion and fear, the desperation of someone whose world was crumbling. But here's the thing about games. I always win. I've been playing them longer than you. I know how the system works. I have friends, connections, power you can't imagine. I'm not playing any games. Then what are you playing at? His hands shot out, grabbing the front of her uniform, bunching the fabric in his fist, pulling her slightly off balance. Who are you really? Where did you learn to shoot like that, to move like that, to handle weapons like they're extensions of your body? Why is your file locked behind clearances I can't access? What are you hiding? Let go of me. Kira's voice remained level, but something had changed, a hardness entering her tone that hadn't been there before, a warning that most people would have recognized as dangerous, as the sound of ice cracking before it breaks. Vandal Cross was not most people. He was a man whose ego had been shattered in front of 83 witnesses, whose authority had been undermined by someone he dismissed as beneath him, whose entire identity, everything he believed about himself, everything he used to define his worth, had been called into question by a cleaning lady with a pistol. "Not until you answer my questions." His grip tightened, pulling her closer, invading her space, using physical intimidation as a weapon. "You've been here 4 years. 4 years of acting like you're invisible, like you're nobody. And suddenly you're disarming panicked trainees and shooting like an Olympic champion. Nobody's that good. Nobody goes from zero to expert overnight." Owen Blake appeared at his shoulder, his expression eager despite the bruises forming on his face from the earlier confrontation. Despite the humiliation of being swept aside like a child, he was still loyal to the man who'd given him purpose and direction, still desperate for approval. "Maybe she's a foreign operative," Owen suggested, his voice carrying a mocking edge. "Planted here to gather intel, Chinese spy, Russian asset, something like that. It would explain the locked file, the hidden skills." "Shut up, Owen." But Vandal's eyes didn't leave Kira's face, searching for cracks in her composure, for any sign of weakness he could exploit, for fear he could use as leverage. "I'm going to find out what you're hiding, and when I do, I'm going to make sure everyone knows you're a fraud, that you've been lying, that you don't belong here, that everything about you is fake." He shoved her backward with enough force to send her stumbling. Her hip caught the edge of the workbench, and for a fraction of a second, she was off balance, vulnerable. Her shirt pulled tight across her shoulder. The aged fabric, stressed beyond its limit by 4 years of daily wear and the violence of the moment, began to give way. The threads that held the seam together, weakened by countless wash cycles and hours of wear, reached their breaking point, and with a sound like tearing paper, the seam split. Time stopped. Because there, exposed on her right shoulder, was a tattoo that every soldier in the United States military would recognize instantly. That carried meaning beyond mere decoration. That spoke of trials endured and oaths taken, of becoming something more than human through training so demanding that most who attempted it failed. A golden eagle, wings spread wide in flight, clutching a trident in one talon, symbol of the sea, and a flintlock pistol in the other, symbol of America's revolutionary heritage. Surrounded by an anchor representing naval tradition, each element rendered in exquisite detail, professional work, the kind done in shops near bases where warriors gathered, where artists understood the significance of what they were permanently marking on flesh. And below it, in stark black letters that seemed to burn against her skin, Team 6, the Trident, the symbol of the Navy SEALs, the most elite special operations force in the world. The warriors who operated in shadows, whose missions were never acknowledged, whose very existence was often classified, who could do things that seemed impossible because they'd trained beyond the limits of normal human capability. The operators who didn't exist on paper, but existed very much in reality. In the compounds they raided, in the hostages they rescued, in the targets they eliminated, in the intelligence they gathered from places no one else could reach. Owen made a sound like a dying animal, a whimper of recognition and sudden, absolute terror. The understanding that he'd assaulted someone who could kill him in a dozen different ways before he even realized he was in danger. Isaac Calloway's hand rose to his forehead in an automatic salute. Before his conscious mind even registered what he was seeing, muscle memory from decades of service, recognizing rank that transcended the written hierarchy, authority that came from accomplishment rather than appointment. Senior Chief. The words came out as a breath, as a prayer, as an acknowledgement of something sacred. Command Sergeant Major Elijah Grant had been walking past when the commotion began. Now he stood frozen, his dark face draining of color as realization dawned like a terrible sunrise. As pieces clicked into place, as 4 years of questions suddenly found their answers. My God, Operation Silent Thunder. The name rippled through the remaining witnesses like an electric current, like lightning seeking ground. Operation Silent Thunder. The classified mission that had been whispered about in intelligence circles for 4 years. The operation that was never officially confirmed, never officially denied. That existed in the space between acknowledgement and secrecy, between history and legend. The ghost story that operators told in private when they thought no one else was listening. The mission that proved sometimes the dead didn't stay dead, and sometimes the living were better off forgotten. Colonel Raymond Hartford emerged from his office at the sound of Isaac's raised voice, at the sudden silence that spoke of revelation, of secrets exposed. He took in the scene with a single glance: Kira's torn shirt, the exposed tattoo, the stunned faces, the recognition dawning across multiple faces at once. And something shifted in his expression. Authorities settled over him like a mantle, transforming him from base commander to something more. Something that spoke of classified briefings and operations that existed only in sealed files, of decisions made in rooms with no windows by people with no names. Senior Chief Kira Thorne, his voice carried across the training yard, commanding attention from every person within earshot, drawing personnel from nearby buildings, creating an audience for what came next. Call sign Wraith, SEAL Team 6, 9 combat deployments, 52 confirmed operations. The words fell like hammer blows, each one striking with the weight of absolute truth, each one reshaping reality for everyone listening. Around them, soldiers were beginning to emerge from buildings, drawn by the commotion, by the sound of Hartford's voice carrying across the base with unusual intensity. Within minutes, every person on the training complex would know, would hear, would understand. Bronze Star with Valor, 3 Purple Hearts. Hartford's voice resonated with the weight of history, of sacrifice, of service that most people couldn't imagine, that existed beyond the realm of normal human experience. Operation Silent Thunder, Kandahar, Afghanistan, April 2019. He paused, meeting Kira's eyes across the distance, giving her a moment to prepare, to accept, to understand that the secret was over, that 4 years of hiding had ended. She held a defensive position for 13 hours under continuous enemy fire, with a collapsed lung, eliminated 23 hostile combatants, saved 17 American lives, refused extraction until every wounded soldier was evacuated, nearly died doing it, should have died doing it, survived because she was too stubborn to quit, too skilled to be killed, too committed to her team to consider herself. The assembled crowd had swollen to over 50 now, more arriving every second, drawn by the magnetic pull of revelation, by the promise of witnessing something extraordinary. Corporal Madison Royce, a female trainee who'd been watching Kira all morning with fascination, had tears streaming down her face. "I knew it," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "God, I knew she was something. The way she moved, the way she carried herself, like someone who'd been tested and hadn't broken. I knew." Jesse Graves, the young soldier Kira had helped that morning, was openly weeping. His hands shook, but not from fear this time, from overwhelming emotion, from the sudden understanding of who had helped him, who had seen his pain and recognized it, who had known exactly what to say because she'd been there herself. "She knew about my PTSD," he managed through tears. "She understood because she lived it, because she's been where I am, because she knows what it's like to have the world feel like it's ending, and you can't tell anyone because they won't understand." Hartford continued, his voice cutting through the gathering crowd like a blade through water. "The only reason you haven't heard her name is because everything about that operation is classified above your clearance level, above my clearance level, above most clearance levels that exist in the United States military. That operation involved war crimes witnessed, illegal detentions documented, atrocities that powerful people wanted buried. He paused, letting that sink in, letting everyone understand the weight of what they were witnessing. Senior Chief Thorne is a ghost, an asset whose very existence is compartmentalized beyond normal channels. She's been hidden here for 4 years, protected, waiting, while people far above our pay grade decided what to do about what she knows, about what she saw, about the crimes she can testify to. Gunnery Sergeant Crane snapped to attention and rendered a parade ground perfect salute, his weathered face carrying an expression of profound respect, of recognition that transcended rank, of one warrior acknowledging another. Senior Chief, his voice carried across the yard, and one by one, every soldier in sight followed suit. Trainees, instructors, officers, support staff. They rose to their feet and saluted the small woman standing alone by the workbench, her torn shirt exposing the symbol of her silent sacrifice, the physical mark of trials endured and oaths kept, of becoming something more than human through training that broke most who attempted it. Captain Hugo Brennan stepped forward, his face gray with shame. The training officer who had dismissed her with a glance now stood at rigid attention, saluting with a precision that suggested desperation. That spoke of understanding how badly he'd failed in his duty. "Senior Chief, I owe you an apology." His voice cracked, the professional veneer shattering like glass under pressure. "I failed in my duty as an officer. I prioritized convenience over justice. I allowed abuse to continue because it was easier than confronting it. Because I didn't want to make waves. Because I chose comfort over courage. There is no excuse. I know that. I can only ask that you accept my apology and believe that I will do better, that I will be better." Kira returned the salute with military precision. Her face still revealed nothing, but Isaac thought he saw something flicker in her eyes. Not satisfaction, not vindication, something softer, something that looked like relief, like the weight of 4 years finally lifting, like being able to breathe after holding your breath until your lungs burned. "There's no need for apologies, Captain," she said quietly, her voice carrying despite its softness. "But there is need for change, for understanding, for recognizing that every person who wears this uniform deserves respect, regardless of their rank, regardless of their role, regardless of what they look like or where they come from." Brennan nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, Senior Chief, there is. And I swear to you, on my honor as an officer, that change starts now, today, with me." Specialist Hewitt had fallen to his knees in the sand, his face cycling through colors like a stoplight, white to red to green and back again. "I challenged a SEAL to a disassembly competition," he said to no one in particular, his voice hollow with shock. "I challenged a member of Team 6, the most elite unit in the most elite force in the world. I trash-talked her. I mocked her. I am the stupidest person alive. I deserve whatever happens to me." Morgan Sullivan pushed through the crowd, tears streaming down her face, not trying to hide them, not caring who saw. When she reached Kira, she didn't salute, didn't stand at attention. She just wrapped her arms around the smaller woman and held on like she was afraid to let go, like Kira might disappear if she loosened her grip. "I knew," Morgan whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "God help me. I knew there was something special about you. The way you carried yourself, the way you worked, the precision, the focus, the way you saw everything but pretended to see nothing. I knew you were more than you claimed." Kira returned the embrace, and for the first time since the confrontation began, her composure cracked slightly, not breaking, but bending, showing the human being beneath the warrior's mask. The woman who'd been hiding for 4 years, who'd been alone for 4 years, who'd been carrying weight that threatened to crush her. "You were kind to me when you didn't have to be, Morgan. That means more than you know, more than I can express. In a place where everyone looked through me, you saw me. You treated me like a person, like someone who mattered. That kept me going. That kept me sane. Owen Blake sat in the sand where he'd fallen, rocking slightly, his face blank with shock, with the understanding of how close he'd come to disaster, of how easily he could have pushed too far, could have triggered a response that would have left him broken on the ground. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "I didn't know." Tears began streaming down his face, the reality of what he'd done crashing over him like a wave. "I swear to God, I didn't know who you were. I didn't know what you'd done. I didn't know anything. But that doesn't excuse it. I understand that now. Even if you were just a technician, even if you were nobody special, what I did was wrong. How I treated you was wrong. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He couldn't finish. The weight of his actions, the magnitude of his mistakes, the understanding of how close he'd come to something unforgivable. It was all too much. And Vandal Cross stood where he had been standing when he'd grabbed Kira's shirt. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. His hand was still extended, frozen in the moment of his final mistake. His face had gone the color of old ash, gray, lifeless, like all the blood had drained from his body, like his heart had stopped beating, but his body hadn't gotten the message yet. And his eyes held the 1,000-yard stare of someone whose entire world had just collapsed, whose understanding of reality had been shattered, who just realized that everything he believed about himself was a lie. Hartford approached him slowly, deliberately, each step measured and final, the walk of a man delivering judgment. "Staff Sergeant Cross." The colonel's voice was soft, but it carried. Everyone heard. Everyone would remember. "You just assaulted a decorated Special Operations veteran, a Bronze Star recipient, a Purple Heart holder 3 times over, a warrior who has served this country with more distinction in 9 deployments than most officers achieve in entire careers." Vandal's mouth moved, but no sound came out. His hand began to tremble, then his arm, then his entire body. "You questioned her competence, her knowledge, her right to be here. You mocked her. You humiliated her. You physically assaulted her." Hartford stepped closer, until he was inches from Vandal's face. "You had the audacity, the sheer arrogance, to tell a woman who has eliminated more enemy combatants than you've ever seen in photographs to stay in her lane. To tell someone who has served with more courage and skill than you could dream of achieving that she doesn't belong, that she isn't worthy." A sound escaped Vandal's throat. It might have been a whimper. It might have been the last gasp of dying pride. It might have been the sound of a man realizing that his life as he knew it was over. Consider your career over. Your service terminated. Your name forever attached to this moment, to this failure. Hartford turned away, the gesture itself a form of dismissal, of declaring someone unworthy of further attention. "M.P.S. Please escort Staff Sergeant Cross to the detention facility, pending court-martial proceedings. Add charges of assault on a senior NCO, conduct unbecoming, abuse of authority, create a hostile work environment, everything you can think of. I want this man's military career destroyed so completely that he never forgets what happens when you abuse power." 2 military police officers materialized from the crowd, their faces carefully neutral as they took positions on either side of the stunned ranger. Vandal's legs seemed to fail him. The MPs had to support most of his weight as they led him away. His feet dragged in the sand, leaving twin trails behind him like the wake of something sinking, like evidence of his passage being erased even as it was created. Owen Blake was next. The young soldier was still sitting when the MPS approached, his face streaked with tears, his body shaking with the enormity of understanding. "Private First Class Blake, you are under arrest for assault on a senior NCO and conspiracy to commit assault. You have the right to remain silent, Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court-martial proceeding. I didn't know. The words tumbled out in a panicked rush, desperate and broken. I didn't know who she was. I swear I didn't know. If I'd known, if I'd understood, I never would have. That, Kira said quietly, her voice cutting through Owen's panic with surgical precision, is precisely the problem. Everyone turned to look at her. The small woman with the torn shirt and the revealed tattoo, and the eyes that had seen things most people couldn't imagine. You treated me the way you did because you thought I was nobody. She looked at Owen, then at the gathered soldiers, her voice calm, measured, but carrying to every corner of the silent yard. Because you thought I was beneath you, because you believed that your rank, your role, your gender made you inherently more valuable than me. She paused, letting the words sink in, letting everyone feel their weight. Your behavior was the problem, and it would have been just as wrong if I actually was just a maintenance technician, if I was nobody special, if I was exactly what you thought I was. The assembled personnel went absolutely still. Some fundamental truth had just been spoken, some principle that transcended rank and role, that spoke to something deeper about service and humanity. And everyone present understood its importance in ways they couldn't quite articulate. Respect shouldn't be conditional on someone's rank or status. Kira's gaze swept across the crowd, meeting eyes, holding them, making sure her message landed. Every person on this base, every technician, every cook, every clerk, they all volunteered to serve their country. They all took an oath. They all put on a uniform and said, I will serve something bigger than myself. They all deserve dignity. They all deserve respect. They all deserve to be treated like human beings rather than resources to be used and discarded. Madison Royce wiped her eyes and nodded, standing straighter, understanding something fundamental about service, about respect, about what it meant to wear the uniform, about being better than you were yesterday. Jesse Graves straightened his shoulders, his hands steady for the first time all day, understanding that weakness wasn't something to hide, but something to acknowledge and overcome. That asking for help wasn't failure, that survival was its own form of strength. Morgan stood beside Kira, her chin raised, her posture proud, understanding that kindness wasn't weakness, and that seeing people for who they really were was the most important skill anyone could possess. That recognizing potential where others saw nothing was what separated good leaders from great ones. As the MPs led Owen away, the young man looked back one last time. His face was a mask of grief and understanding, of someone who'd learned the hardest lesson of his life and would carry it forever, who would spend years making amends, trying to become someone better than who he'd been in this moment. The training yard slowly emptied as personnel returned to their duties. Their worldviews fundamentally altered. Their understanding of themselves and their service changed in ways they were still processing. Conversations would happen in barracks that night. Questions would be asked. Stories would be shared. Lessons would be learned. And everyone who'd witnessed what happened would carry it with them as a reminder that the people we dismiss, the ones we overlook, the ones we think don't matter, they might be the most important people of all. The secure phone in Colonel Hartford's office had been ringing for 30 minutes. The red light blinked with mechanical persistence, each pulse a demand for attention that couldn't be ignored. Level 7 encryption. The kind of security classification that existed in a realm beyond normal military operations. In spaces where decisions were made that would never appear in official records, where operations were planned that the world would never know about. Hartford stood at his window, watching the last light fade from the training yard where Kira Thorne's secret had been laid bare just hours ago. His weathered hand rested on the glass, fingers splayed against the cool surface, as if he could somehow touch the weight of what was coming. He'd known this moment would arrive eventually, had known it from the day Kira first appeared at Fort Bragg 4 years ago, carrying wounds that went deeper than flesh, seeking refuge in the kind of invisibility that only the truly broken understood. He'd protected her, covered, redirected inquiries, ensured that her file remained locked behind clearances that would stop casual curiosity dead in its tracks. But the phone kept ringing, and some calls couldn't be ignored forever. "Sir," the voice came from behind him. Kira stood in the doorway, her torn uniform replaced by fresh fatigues, the sealed trident now visible on her shoulder like a declaration of war, like a challenge to anyone who might still doubt. "You wanted to see me." Hartford turned from the window, his pale blue eyes carrying the weight of 6 decades of secrets. "That phone has been ringing since the moment your tattoo was exposed. Level 7 encryption. I've only seen that twice before in my career." He paused, letting the implications settle between them. Both times it concerned operations that officially don't exist, operations that never happened, missions that were successful but can never be acknowledged. Kira's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. Recognition, understanding, perhaps even resignation. "Answer it," Hartford said quietly. "I'll give you privacy." "Sir, whatever this is about." "Senior Chief." His voice carried the gentle firmness of a man who'd given orders in places where hesitation meant death. "I suspect I already know what this is, and I suspect you need to hear it." He moved toward the door, pausing beside her. For just a moment, his hand rested on her shoulder, a gesture that transcended rank and protocol. "Thank you for today, for everything, for being exactly who you are when it would have been easier to be anyone else. For 4 years of service in silence, for maintaining your honor when everyone around you lost theirs." Then he was gone, the door closing with a soft click that sounded like finality. Kira stood alone in the office, staring at the blinking red light. 4 years. 4 years of peace. Fragile and temporary, but peace nonetheless. 4 years of being nobody, of cleaning weapons and maintaining equipment and existing in spaces where the past couldn't find her. The light blinked, insistent, demanding. She picked up the receiver. "This is Thorne." The voice that answered was female, heavily modulated to the point of being mechanical. But something in the cadence was familiar, something that triggered memories she'd tried to bury. "Wraith, welcome back." 3 words, simple, direct, but they carried the weight of recognition, of shared history, of operations that existed only in sealed files and the nightmares of those who'd survived them. "Who is this?" "A friend, an old colleague. It doesn't matter. What matters is what I'm about to tell you." A pause, carefully calculated. "We've been watching your progress, the Wounded Warrior program, the maintenance work, the incident today. We've been waiting for exactly this moment, for the pressure to build until your cover couldn't hold anymore." Kira's grip tightened on the receiver. "You've been surveilling me? We've been protecting you. There's a difference. Making sure nobody asked too many questions. Making sure the people hunting you didn't find you before we were ready. I don't. We have a mission, Wraith. One that requires your specific skill set, your particular history, your unique connection to an asset we've been tracking for 4 years." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. 4 years. The same amount of time Kira had been hiding at Fort Bragg. "I'm retired. Medical discharge, even if it concerns Raven?" The name hit her like a physical blow. For a moment she couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The office around her seemed to tilt, reality shifting on an axis that had suddenly lost its center. Her free hand reached out, finding the edge of Hartford's desk, gripping it hard enough that her knuckles went white. "Raven is dead." The words came out rough, scraped raw by 4 years of grief. "KIA Kandahar, I saw him fall." "You saw him fall. You assumed the worst. Everyone did. That was the point. That's what they wanted you to believe." The voice softened slightly, taking on an almost gentle quality. "But assumptions aren't facts, Wraith. And sometimes the dead don't stay buried. Sometimes what you saw wasn't the whole story. Kira sank into Hartford's chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. Images flooded her mind, unbidden and overwhelming. The compound in Kandahar, smoke and fire, and the sound of automatic weapons tearing the air apart. Raven's voice on the radio, steady even as everything collapsed around them. "Get them out, Wraith. That's an order. The easy days are over. Now go." She'd watched from the extraction point as the building came down, watched as fire and smoke swallowed everything, watched as the place where her spotter, her teammate, her friend had been making his last stand simply ceased to exist. They declared him KIA, body never recovered. Another ghost added to the long list of warriors who disappeared into the dark places of the world and never came home. "That's impossible," she managed finally. "I watched the building collapse. I saw the footage. I attended the memorial service. I spoke at it. I looked his mother in the eye and told her he died a hero. We have satellite imagery, signal intercepts, human from assets on the ground." A pause. "Lieutenant Benjamin Ashford is alive, Wraith. Confirmed as of 72 hours ago. He's been held in a black site facility on the Syria-Iraq border for 4 years. By people who needed him disappeared, but couldn't quite bring themselves to kill him, who thought he might be useful someday." The room spun. Kira's training kicked in automatically, forcing her to breathe, to center herself, to process information even as her emotional core threatened to fragment. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because we're mounting a recovery operation, and we want you on the team. Because Raven asked for you specifically. Because he's been waiting for you for 4 years. I haven't agreed to anything. 6 months ago, one of our assets managed to make brief contact with the prisoner. She had approximately 90 seconds before guards returned." The voice paused, letting the moment build. "Ashford gave her a message to deliver. He said, 'Tell Wraith I'm still here. Tell her the easy days are over.'" The phrase hit her harder than the name had. Their code, the words they'd used during training, during deployments, during the moments when things got hard and staying easy would have meant death. A signal between warriors who understood that survival sometimes required becoming something harder than the circumstances trying to kill you. "He knew we'd come for him," Kira whispered. "He knew you'd come for him. You were his teammate, his friend, the person he trusted more than anyone else in the world." The voice took on an edge of urgency. "He's been holding on to hope for 4 years because he believed in you, because he knew that if there was any way to find him, any way to bring him home, you would find it. And he was right." Kira closed her eyes, fighting back tears that threatened to overwhelm her professional composure. 4 years of guilt. 4 years of carrying his death like a stone in her chest. 4 years of wondering if she could have done something different, made some other choice, found some way to bring him home. And now this. The possibility of redemption wrapped in mystery and delivered by a voice she didn't recognize, but somehow knew was telling the truth. You could hear truth in certain silences, in the spaces between words where lies couldn't hide. "Brief me." Her voice was steady now, clear, purpose crystallizing. "I want to know everything. Compound layout, guard rotations, entry and exit points, extraction protocols, enemy force composition, rules of engagement, everything." The sound that came through the line might have been approval. "Welcome back, Wraith. Briefing is at 0500 tomorrow. Secure facility off base. Transportation will pick you up at 0430. "Understood. And Wraith, this operation doesn't exist. If something goes wrong, there's no cavalry coming, no extraction, no acknowledgement that we were ever there. You'll be operating in a foreign country without authorization. If you're caught, the United States government will deny any knowledge of your actions. You understand what that means?" Black Ops. Kira had run enough of them to know the drill. Plausible deniability, need-to-know basis, expendable assets pursuing objectives that couldn't be officially sanctioned. "When has it ever been any different?" The line went dead. Kira sat in the darkness of Hartford's office, the phone still pressed to her ear, her mind a battlefield of warring emotions, hope and fear, purpose and doubt. The past she tried to escape, and the future rushing toward her like a freight train. Through the window, she could see the training yard where her secret had been exposed, where everything had changed. Somewhere down there, Morgan was probably starting her evening shift. Madison was probably reviewing the day's training. Jesse was probably fighting his demons with the courage of a soldier who refused to surrender. But Kira's thoughts were elsewhere, on a man she'd thought dead, on a promise she'd thought broken, on a mission that would either bring him home or ensure she joined him in whatever dark place he'd been held for 4 years. She pulled out the challenge coin Hartford had given her 6 months ago. In the dim light from the window, she could just make out the name engraved on the reverse side. Benjamin Ashford. Raven. Hartford had known. Maybe not everything, but enough. Enough to give her this coin. Enough to prepare her for this moment, even if she hadn't understood what was coming. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Come in." Isaac Calloway entered, his weathered face carrying 2 cups of coffee, steam rising in the cool evening air. "Figured you might need this." He set 1 cup on the desk, settling into the chair across from her with the comfortable ease of a man who'd earned the right to be informal with superior ranks. "How did you know I was here?" 62 years of learning to read situations. Isaac took a sip of his coffee, his gray eyes studying her face. "And the fact that Colonel Hartford just told me you'd be leaving soon, asked me to check in on you." Kira wrapped her hands around the coffee cup, feeling the warmth seep into her palms. Grounding. Real. "They found him, Isaac. They found Raven." "I know. Hartford told me that much. Also told me you're going after him." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to something private. "And I know that look in your eyes. I've seen it before. In operators preparing for missions they might not come back from. He's alive. He's been waiting for 4 years. I can't." "I'm not here to talk you out of it." Isaac set down his cup with deliberate care. "I'm here to tell you something you need to hear before you go." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a tactical compass, worn, the kind that had seen decades of use and carried the weight of history in every scratch and dent. "Desert Storm, 1991. I was 33 years old, attached to SEAL teams for reconnaissance operations. We got pinned down outside Basra, surrounded on 3 sides, communications shot to hell." He turned the compass over in his weathered hands. "This compass got me through. Every time I thought we were lost, every time I was sure we'd never make it out, I'd check this bearing, and it never failed." He pressed it into Kira's hand, closing her fingers around it. "It's guided me through 100 missions, Senior Chief. Brought me home every single time. Now I'm passing it to you, because I know you'll bring it back. And you'll bring yourself back. And you'll bring Raven back too." Kira looked down at the compass, seeing the inscription etched into the back. "Always find your way home. Desert Storm, 91. "Isaac, I can't." "Yes, you can. And you will." His voice carried the absolute certainty of a man who'd seen too much to doubt his own judgment. "Bring it back. Bring yourself back. These kids need to see what you represent. They need teachers who've been through the fire and chosen to serve anyway." "What if I can't save him? What if I get there and he's already gone? What if—" Isaac was quiet for a long moment, his weathered face thoughtful in the dim light. "I worked with your father, Brigadier General Marcus Thorne, Afghanistan operations, early 2001, right after everything started. Classified missions that officially never happened." Kira's breath caught. "You knew my father?" "I did. He was one of the finest officers I ever served with. Brilliant tactician, fearless leader. But more than that, he understood something that most warriors never learn." "What's that?" "That success isn't measured in kills or medals or operations completed. It's measured in the people you bring home, the lives you save, The difference you make in a world that's mostly darkness. Isaac leaned back, his eyes distant with memory. Your father died on a classified mission in 2001. You were 13 years old. What they didn't tell you, what they couldn't tell you because it was sealed, is that he died covering the retreat of 8 operators. He could have extracted. He had the window, but he stayed behind to make sure everyone else got out. Tears streamed down Kira's face, silent and unstoppable. He made a choice that day, to sacrifice himself so others could live. That's what warriors do, Kira. We don't quit, even when the odds say we should. We don't abandon our people, even when staying means dying. He stood, moving toward the door, then paused. You're his daughter in every way that matters. You have his courage, his skill, his understanding of what it means to serve. Whatever happens on this mission, whatever choices you have to make, trust that. Trust the legacy he gave you. Thank you, Isaac, for everything. Thank me by coming back. And when you do, we'll talk about that instructor position Hartford is going to offer you. Because those kids out there need someone like you. Someone who understands that being a warrior means more than knowing how to fight. It means knowing when to fight and when to show restraint. When to destroy and when to protect. After he left, Kira sat alone with her coffee and the compass and the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. Outside, the base had settled into its nighttime rhythm. Guard changes, patrol routes, the familiar sounds of a military installation preparing for sleep. But Kira wouldn't sleep tonight. She had preparations to make, equipment to gather, a mission to plan, and a promise to keep. She rose from Hartford's chair and made her way through the darkened corridors of the command building, her footsteps echoing on the tile floors, each step carrying her further from the person she'd been that morning and closer to the warrior she'd tried to leave behind. Her quarters were small, Spartan, chosen specifically for their anonymity. A bunk, a locker, a small bathroom with water pressure that felt like luxury after 4 years of base housing. But hidden in the back of her closet, behind uniforms that smelled of gun oil and sweat, was something else. A go bag, black tactical pack, waterproof, reinforced, designed to carry everything an operator might need for a mission that existed in the space between official sanction and absolute deniability. She hadn't opened it in 4 years, hadn't needed to. The person who'd packed this bag, who'd prepared for contingencies and planned for worst-case scenarios, that person had died on a rooftop in Kandahar with a bullet in her lung and the screams of dying men in her ears. Or so she'd thought. Kira pulled the bag from its hiding place and set it on her bunk. The zipper still moved smoothly, well-maintained despite years of disuse. Inside, everything was exactly as she'd left it. Medical kit, combat-grade tourniquet, hemostatic agents, pressure bandages, the tools for keeping people alive when death was determined to claim them, emergency rations, MREs stripped of unnecessary packaging, compressed to minimum volume, capable of sustaining an operator for days in hostile territory. False identification, 3 different countries, 3 different names, 3 different lives that existed only on paper and in the databases of intelligence agencies that didn't officially exist. And at the bottom, wrapped in oiled cloth, her personal sidearm, a modified Glock 19 that had accompanied her on 9 deployments. Every mission, every operation where death was a possibility and survival was earned through skill and luck in equal measure. She unwrapped the weapon slowly, reverently. The metal was cool against her palms, familiar in ways that transcended conscious thought. This pistol had saved her life more times than she could count, had taken others when there was no choice left, had been the last line of defense between her team and oblivion on more occasions than she wanted to remember. Her fingers moved automatically, field stripping the weapon, checking each component with the methodical precision of someone for whom this ritual was as natural as breathing. Slide, barrel, recoil spring, frame, everything in perfect condition, maintained by instinct, even during years of disuse. She reassembled the Glock, loaded 3 magazines with practiced efficiency, secured everything in the go bag according to a pattern burned into muscle memory through countless iterations. A knock at her door interrupted her preparations. "It's open." Morgan Sullivan entered, her red hair catching the harsh fluorescent light. She carried a small bag, her expression a mixture of concern and determination. "Heard you're leaving." "Word travels fast." "It always does." Morgan set the bag on the bunk beside Kira. "I brought you something. Figured you might need it." Inside were sandwiches, energy bars, a thermos of coffee, simple things, practical things, the kind of care that spoke louder than grand gestures. "Thank you, Morgan. I'm not going to ask where you're going or what you're doing." Morgan sat on the edge of the bunk, her voice soft. "But I need to ask you something else." "Go ahead." "Why maintenance? After everything you'd done, all the places you'd been, all the people you'd saved, why come here and clean weapons?" Kira was quiet for a long moment, considering the question. It deserved an honest answer. "My father wrote letters from his deployments. I found them after he died, tucked away in a box my mother kept. In one of them he wrote, 'True warriors serve in peace, not just war. The weapon that never jams because it's properly maintained saves as many lives as the one that fires true when needed.'" She picked up one of Morgan's sandwiches, not because she was hungry, but because the gesture felt right. "I wanted to honor that, to serve without killing, to keep people safe not through violence, but through preparation. Every weapon I maintained, every rifle I checked, I knew I was protecting someone, maybe saving their life when the moment came that they needed their equipment to function perfectly." Morgan wiped her eyes. "That's beautiful, and incredibly sad. Most true things are." They sat together in comfortable silence. Two women from different worlds connected by a simple act of human kindness that transcended rank and role and expectation. "When you come back," Morgan said finally, "and you will come back, I want you to teach me. Whatever you know, however you became who you are, I want to learn." Kira smiled, the expression carrying warmth that had been absent from her face for years. "I'd like that." After Morgan left, Kira continued her preparations. She checked her tactical gear, verified her equipment, ensured that every item in her go bag was positioned exactly where instinct would reach for it in moments of crisis. But her mind was elsewhere, on a compound in hostile territory, on a man who'd been waiting 4 years for rescue, on a mission that would either end in redemption or add one more ghost to the collection she already carried. At 0200, she made her way to the base chapel. Small, non-denominational, designed to serve the spiritual needs of soldiers from every faith and background. It was empty at this hour, just rows of pews and an altar lit by a single candle. Kira knelt in the front row, not because she was particularly religious, but because some rituals transcended belief. Because warriors throughout history had sought solace in quiet places before walking into darkness. Because prayer, whether to God or fate or the universe itself, was a way of acknowledging that some things were beyond human control. "I don't know if you're listening," she whispered to the empty space. "I don't know if my father is somewhere listening either. But if you are, if he is, I need you to know something." Her hands gripped the pew in front of her, knuckles white with tension. "I left Raven behind once. I watched him fall, and I couldn't save him. That failure has lived in my chest like a tumor for 4 years. It's colored everything, shaped every choice, defined who I became after Kandahar." Tears fell freely now, splashing onto the worn wood. "Tomorrow I get a chance to make it right, to bring him home, to prove that leaving him wasn't the end. Just a pause, a detour on a road that always led back to this moment." She wiped her eyes, steadied her breathing. "If I don't make it back, I want someone to know that I tried, that I didn't give up, that I honored the legacy my father left me by choosing service over safety, by picking people over self-preservation. The candle flickered. A draft, nothing more. But in that moment, it felt like acknowledgement, like something beyond herself was bearing witness to the vow she was making. The easy days are over. They always were. But warriors don't need easy. We just need purpose. She stood, feeling something settle in her chest. Not peace exactly, but acceptance. The understanding that whatever came next, she would face it with the full measure of her training, her experience, her will. At 0400, she made one final stop. The armory where her secret had been revealed, where everything had changed. The space was empty now, weapons secured for the night, workstations cleaned and organized for the next day's operations. She approached the maintenance bench where she'd spent 4 years of her life, ran her fingers across the surface, feeling the familiar texture of metal and oil and purpose. This place had been her sanctuary, her hiding spot, the space where she could serve without the weight of command, where she could protect without the burden of decision. But that chapter was closing. Whatever happened in the next 72 hours, she wouldn't be coming back to this bench as a person who'd left it. Either she'd return as Senior Chief Kira Thorne, instructor and mentor, helping build the next generation of warriors, or she wouldn't return at all. In the corner, on a shelf she'd claimed as her own, sat a rifle. Not military issue, not part of the regular inventory. This was Benjamin Ashford's personal weapon, the one he'd carried on training exercises, the one she'd maintained religiously for 4 years as a memorial to a man she'd thought lost. She'd cleaned it weekly, checked every component, kept it in perfect condition, as if someday he might walk through the door and need it again. Now that seemed less like ritual and more like prophecy. Kira picked up the rifle, feeling its familiar weight. She field-stripped it one last time, checking each part with the loving attention of someone preparing a sacred object. Then she reassembled it, loaded a magazine, secured it in a carrying case. When Raven came home, he'd come home to a weapon that had been waiting for him, that had been maintained with the kind of care that spoke louder than words, that proved someone had never stopped believing. At 0415, Jesse Graves found her there, the young soldier who'd been trembling on the firing line that morning, who'd been drowning in PTSD until Kira had thrown him a lifeline disguised as shooting instruction. Senior Chief, he stood in the doorway, uncertain, his hands steadier than they'd been 12 hours ago, but still showing the faint tremor of someone fighting invisible demons. I heard you were leaving. Just for a little while, Corporal. I wanted to thank you for today, for seeing me when everyone else just saw a problem. Kira set down the rifle case and turned to face him fully, giving him the respect of her complete attention. You're not a problem, Jesse. You're a warrior dealing with wounds that most people never see. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. My father had the same tremors when he came back from Iraq. Second deployment, 2007. He never talked about it, never got help, just drank until the shaking stopped. Jesse's voice cracked. He killed himself when I was 16. I've been terrified I'd end up the same way. Your father did the best he could with what he knew, but you have something he didn't. You have people who understand, who've been where you are, who can help you find a path through the darkness. She moved closer, her voice dropping to something gentle. The trembling isn't weakness. It's your body remembering how to survive. The nightmares aren't failure. They're your mind processing trauma so you can move forward. All of it is proof that you're still fighting. And as long as you're fighting, you haven't lost. Jesse wiped his eyes. How do you cope? After everything you've seen, everything you've done, how do you keep going? I serve, even when I'm scared, even when it hurts, even when every instinct says to hide. Because the people I serve, the ones I protect, they're worth it. She placed a hand on his shoulder. You are worth it, Jesse. Your life matters. Your service matters. And when I get back, we're going to work together to make sure you have the tools you need to keep fighting. Not against enemies, but for yourself, for your future, for the person you're meant to become." "Yes, Senior Chief, thank you." After he left, Kira stood alone in the armory one last time, memorizing the space, honoring what it had meant to her. Then she picked up Raven's rifle case in her go-bag and walked out into the pre-dawn darkness. A black SUV with tinted windows was waiting at the designated pickup point. The rear door opened from inside, a silent invitation. Kira climbed in without hesitation, the door closing behind her with a solid thunk of armored plating. The vehicle accelerated into the night. Inside, two men occupied the front seats. Both wore civilian clothes, but their bearing marked them as operators. The way they sat, the way they scanned the environment even while driving, the way they existed in constant readiness. Neither introduced themselves. Neither seemed inclined to small talk. Kira was fine with that. She had enough to think about without adding forced conversation to the mix. The drive took 40 minutes, winding through back roads and secure checkpoints until they reached an unremarkable building on the outskirts of Fort Bragg. Chain-link fence, concrete walls, a single guard station manned by soldiers who checked credentials with unusual thoroughness. Inside, the building transformed into something else entirely. State-of-the-art communications equipment lined the walls. Digital displays showed satellite imagery of terrain Kira recognized immediately. The Syria-Iraq border, her old hunting ground, the place where she'd left pieces of herself that could never be recovered. 3 people waited in the briefing room. A man stood at the center, his back turned, studying a tactical display with focused intensity. Tall, athletic, close-cropped gray hair, the posture of someone accustomed to command. When he turned, Kira saw eyes that had seen too much, served too much, carried too much, eyes that recognized the same in others. "Wraith," the man's voice carried authority without arrogance. "Thank you for coming. You can call me Shepard. It's not my name, but it'll do." Kira shook his hand, noting the strength in his grip. The scars on his knuckles that spoke of violence survived. Commander Garrett Wolf, former Delta Force, the kind of operator who'd spent decades in dark places, doing things that would never be acknowledged. "You're the one who called." "I am." Shepard gestured to the tactical display where the compound layout was rendered in precise detail. "Let me introduce you to your team." 2 men stood near the communication station. Both carried themselves with the controlled readiness of operators who'd spent years in dark places. Both had eyes that tracked movement with unconscious precision. "This is Nomad," a man in his late 30s with a Scottish accent and features that suggested Highland ancestry, stepped forward. "Lieutenant Callum Drummond, formerly Delta Force, explosives specialist. If it needs to blow up, he's your man." Nomad nodded, his pale eyes assessing Kira with professional interest. "Heard about you, Wraith. Desert Storm guys still tell stories. Don't believe everything you hear. Wouldn't dream of it." A ghost of a smile crossed his weathered face. "And this is Echo." A man in his mid-30s with an Irish accent extended his hand. "Sergeant Declan Quinn, formerly DEVGRU, Communications and Infiltration Specialist. Doors that don't want to open tend to change their minds around him." Kira shook his hand, noting the way he moved. Economical, precise. The mark of someone who'd learned that wasted motion could mean death. "Senior Chief, honor to work with you. 4 operators for a rescue operation in hostile territory." Kira looked at Shepard, calculating odds and outcomes. Small team, minimal footprint, maximum deniability. Shepard's expression was neutral, professional. "This operation doesn't exist, Wraith. If something goes wrong, there's no cavalry coming, no extraction, no acknowledgement that we were ever there. Black Ops, the blackest." He pulled up a file on the display, showing Kira's service record. or rather the parts of it that existed beyond classified seals. Which brings me to an important point. Why you? Why not someone on active duty? Kira had been wondering the same thing since the phone call. Because Raven asked for you, specifically, by name. The words hit like a physical blow. Kira's hands clenched at her sides, her breathing carefully controlled. When? 6 months ago, our asset managed brief contact with the prisoner. She had approximately 90 seconds before guards returned. Shepard pulled up surveillance photos taken through a grimy window. Raven's face, thinner, bearded, marked by captivity, but alive, undeniably alive. He gave her a message to deliver. He said, "Tell Wraith I'm still here. Tell her the easy days are over." Kira closed her eyes, fighting back tears that threatened to overwhelm her professional composure. Their code, the phrase they'd used during training, during deployments, during the moments when things got hard and staying easy would have meant death. A signal between warriors who understood that survival sometimes required becoming something harder than the circumstances trying to kill you. "He knew we'd come for him," she whispered. "He knew you'd come for him." Shepard's voice softened slightly. "You were his teammate, his friend. He held on to hope because he believed in you." Kira opened her eyes, and when she spoke, her voice was steady as steel. "Brief me on the compound layout, guard rotations, entry and exit points. I want to know everything." Shepard smiled, the expression transforming his severe features into something almost warm. "Welcome back, Wraith. But first there's something else you need to understand. Operation Silent Thunder wasn't what you thought it was." He pulled up classified documents, satellite imagery, intercepted communications. "Your team didn't get ambushed by Taliban in Kandahar. That compound you raided, you witnessed something you weren't supposed to see. Illegal detention, enhanced interrogation, war crimes committed by American personnel. Your team documented it, reported it up the chain of command." Kira's blood ran cold. 3 days later, you got ambushed. 5 members of Team 6 died. Ashford was captured. You barely escaped with a collapsed lung. Shepard's voice hardened. "It wasn't bad luck, Wraith. It was an assassination. An American black operation designed to eliminate witnesses, to bury evidence, to protect powerful people who didn't want their crimes exposed." "You're saying—" "I'm saying someone in our own government ordered the hit on your team, and for 4 years they've been hunting you, using Ashford as bait, waiting for you to surface so they could finish the job." The briefing lasted 2 hours. Kira absorbed every detail with the focus of an operator preparing for combat. Guard schedules down to the minute, patrol patterns memorized with the precision of someone whose life would depend on being exactly where she needed to be, exactly when she needed to be there. Structural weaknesses identified and cataloged. Emergency protocols understood and planned for. By the time Shepard finished, Kira had memorized the compound layout as thoroughly as she knew her own quarters, could close her eyes and walk through it in her mind, visualizing every turn, every door, every window, every angle that could conceal a threat or provide an opportunity. The plan was simple. All good plans were simple. Complexity was the enemy of execution, and execution was everything. Insert via modified Black Hawk helicopter at remote landing zone, 12 kilometers from target. Approach on foot under cover of darkness, using terrain to mask movement. Breach compound at 0200 local time, when guard rotation left a 90-second window of vulnerability. Extract Raven. Exfil to pickup point before dawn brought visibility that would make concealment impossible. Simple, clean, perfect, which meant something would go wrong. It always did. "Any questions?" Shepard asked. Kira had dozens, but only one that mattered. "When do we leave?" "Transport departs at 1800 tonight. You'll have approximately 12 hours to rest and prepare. I strongly suggest you use that time to sleep. You're no good to anyone exhausted." Kira nodded, recognizing the wisdom even as her mind raced with everything that needed to be done, everything that could go wrong, everything she needed to prepare for. There are quarters in the East Wing, Shepard continued. Shower, sleep, eat. Your gear will be ready when you wake. As Kira moved toward the door, Shepard's voice stopped her. Wraith, one more thing. She turned back. I'm glad you're on this mission. Ashford couldn't ask for a better guardian angel. Kira met his eyes, seeing something in them that looked like respect mixed with concern. I failed him once. I won't fail him again. The modified Black Hawk cut through the night sky like a blade. 6 hours of flight over terrain that shifted from familiar to foreign, from the controlled chaos of American military installations to the lawless expanse of desert that marked the Syria-Iraq border. Kira sat in the rear compartment, her body swaying with the aircraft's rhythm, her mind already at the compound 12 kilometers away. Nomad and Echo occupied the opposite bench, lost in pre-mission rituals that needed no words. Nomad checked his explosive charges with gentle precision, fingers moving like a surgeon's. Echo tested communication frequencies, his face illuminated by soft electronic glow. They were professionals, the kind who survived because they understood preparation wasn't paranoia, but wisdom written in blood. Through the open door, Kira watched the world slide past. Cities became villages, became nothing. Lights surrendered to darkness. And somewhere in that vast emptiness, a man who should have been dead was waiting for someone to remember he existed. She pulled out the photo from 2019, before Kandahar, before everything changed. Raven smiled up at her from better days, his arm around her shoulders, both of them young enough to believe themselves immortal. The image was creased, worn from 4 years over her heart, a talisman against forgetting. He looks like good people. Echo's voice cut through the helicopter's roar. Kira nodded. The best. The move was hard, Echo said quietly, leaving a teammate behind, even when ordered. He covered my retreat in Kandahar, told me to get the wounded out while he held the line. I watched the building come down on him. The weight of it threatened to crush her. 4 years, because I believed what I saw instead of what I knew. Nomad looked up from his explosives, his Scottish burr gentle. You did what any operator would, completed the mission, got your people out. That's not failure, Senior Chief. That's following orders. Orders he gave so I wouldn't die trying to save him, which means he succeeded. Echo leaned forward. You lived. Now you return the favor. The wheel turns. That's how it works. The simplicity cut through 4 years of guilt like a knife through rope. Raven had chosen, had traded his freedom for her life. That wasn't her failure. That was his gift. And gifts demanded honor, not guilt. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Nomad's smile carried shared history. Thank me when we're wheels up with your friend. Brigadier General Lydia Sterling's voice crackled through their headsets. 30 minutes to LZ. Final equipment check. Questions? Silence. They'd reviewed everything twice. More was noise. Kira checked her gear one last time. Modified Glock 19. 3 magazines. Combat knife, cross-draw. Body armor with ceramic plates. Medical kit. Isaac's compass in her left breast pocket. Her father's coin in her right. Everything where instinct would find it. The helicopter began descent, dropping fast. Kira's stomach lurched with familiar adrenaline burn. This was the moment where planning became action, where theory met reality, where warriors learned if they'd prepared enough or if the universe had other plans. She closed her eyes, ran through the compound one final time. Main building, 2nd floor, northwest corner, Raven's cell. Padlocked door, 2 guards, 90-second window. Simple, clean, perfect. Which meant something would go wrong. It always did. The Black Hawk touched down in a dry riverbed, rotors kicking dust clouds that turned the world into a swirling gray void. Kira was out before skids settled, boots hitting ground, too solid after 6 hours of flight. Clear, Nomad reported. Move out, Kira took point. 12 kilometers of hostile territory stretched before them. 12 kilometers that looked short on maps, but felt infinite when every step might be your last. They moved in tactical column, 3 shadows across desert, no lights, no sound beyond soft boot crunch and measured breathing. The moon rose and set. Stars wheeled overhead in patterns Kira remembered from 100 deployments. Constellations that had watched warriors move through darkness since humans first learned to kill each other for reasons they called righteous. Her injured lung protested, old wounds spiking pain with every breath. The bullet wound from Kandahar that had never fully healed, that reminded her with each step that survival was temporary and death was patient. But she pushed through, drawing on reserves built through years of training. Through operations where quitting meant dying, and dying meant letting down everyone who depended on you. Pain was temporary, failure was permanent. 2 hours in, Echo raised his fist. Movement, 200 meters, bearing 045. Kira dropped, weapon ready. Through night vision she saw them, 2 figures walking patrol, weapons slung casually, local militia, not military trained, just men with guns guarding something nobody would be crazy enough to attack. They were wrong. The patrol passed within 50 meters. Close enough Kira heard their conversation. Arabic, regional dialect, talking about families and food, normal things, human things. She felt sympathy. They were just doing a job, collecting paychecks, trying to survive in a world that offered few choices and fewer second chances. But they stood between her and Raven. When they passed, the team resumed movement. 3 more hours of careful approach, watching every shadow, questioning every sound. The slow grind of tactical movement through hostile territory where patience was survival and haste was death. Finally, the compound appeared, smaller than imagery suggested, buildings surrounded by makeshift walls, guard towers with spotlights sweeping predetermined patterns, security that assumed competence from defenders and incompetence from attackers. They would learn. Kira raised binoculars, scanning until she found it. 2nd floor window, behind glass barely visible. A figure sitting motionless, waiting, hoping, believing someone would come. Her hands trembled. First emotion since deployment, she forced them steady. Target confirmed, she whispered. Nomad and Echo took positions. Weapons on guard towers. Guards rotated exactly as predicted. 90 seconds, north wall unwatched. Vulnerability born of routine and the arrogance of believing nobody would dare. Go. They moved over the wall in 3 seconds. Inside the compound, they split. Nomad and Echo to guard posts. Kira to main building. She reached the door, lock picks appearing like magic from her gear. 4 seconds. The lock clicked open. She slipped inside, darkness swallowing her. The hallway exactly as described. Dark, silent, smelling of dust in places where hope died slowly. Stairs creaked. She froze, listening. Nothing but the compound settling, old buildings breathing in the night. The room at hall's end. Wooden door, heavy padlock. Kira worked her picks, fingers surgical, feeling the mechanism, understanding its secrets through touch alone. The lock clicked open. She pushed the door inward, and there he was. Benjamin Ashford, Raven, 4 years older, 30 pounds lighter, eyes too haunted, but alive, breathing, real. Wraith. His voice was ragged, rough from disuse and screaming and 4 years of waiting in darkness. I knew you'd come. She crossed in 3 strides, knelt, hands on the chains binding him. Professional, efficient, but her eyes told everything. 4 years of grief lifting, guilt finding absolution, promise kept. Can you walk? For you? Raven's smile was broken but genuine. I can run. The chains fell. Raven slumped. Kira caught him, supporting his weight. Easy days are over, he whispered. Their code, their promise, their prayer. They never were, brother. Let's go home. She keyed her radio. Shepherd, Nomad, Echo, package secured, beginning extraction. Copy. Nomad's voice carried relief. We're clear. Move to exfil. They made it downstairs, through the hallway, out the door. Compound quiet. Guards neutralized. Way clear. Too easy. Kira's neck hairs rose. That primitive warning that operated below thought, that had kept her alive when logic said dead. Move faster, she urged Raven. Something's wrong. Halfway to the wall, lights blazed. Spotlights turned night to day. Sirens wailed. Armed men poured from every building. 30+ hostiles. Weapons raised. Movements coordinated. Not confusion. Choreography. Contact. Nomad's voice tight. Multiple hostiles. All directions. Kira's earpiece picked up enemy communications. But not Arabic. English. American English. Military terminology. Professional jargon. Target acquired. Wraith protocol confirmed. Notify oversight. Ice flooded her veins. This wasn't foreign militia. This was U.S. Black Ops. And Shepard was with them. Shepard, you're clear. The voice on enemy comms was professional, clinical. We'll handle cleanup. Static on Kira's radio. Then Shepard's voice, no longer friendly, no longer ally. Sorry, Wraith, nothing personal. Operation Silent Thunder embarrassed powerful people. Civilian casualties, friendly fire, cover-ups. Your team refused to lie. That made you liabilities. Pieces fell with sickening clarity. Silent Thunder hadn't been compromised by Taliban. The Kandahar ambush wasn't bad luck. It was intentional, orchestrated. American operation to eliminate operators who'd witnessed something, who'd refused to falsify reports, who'd chosen integrity over convenience. Raven was insurance, Shepard continued. Casual cruelty. We knew you'd come. 4 years we waited. Patience pays. Kira's hands tightened on her weapon. 4 years of hiding. Wasted. Everything manipulation. Everything trap. The mission was never rescuing Ashford. It was eliminating the ghost who knew too much. The witness who couldn't be bought or threatened or broken. Nomad. Echo. Kira's voice cut through the chaos with command authority transcending rank. Alternate extraction. Get Raven out. Rally point Charlie. Now. Negative. Nomad's determination absolute. We don't leave teammates. That's a direct order. The weight of her father's legacy. Isaac's compass. 4 years of guilt transformed into purpose. I'll draw them off. You get Raven to the rally point. I make sure you have time. Kira, no! Raven's voice cracked. 4 years ago you gave an order. I followed. Now I'm ordering you. 4 years ago, you gave your freedom for my life. She met his eyes. Now I make sure you get home. This time, I don't leave you behind. I make the choice you made, the one my father made. The one warriors make when they understand what service means. She didn't wait for response. Sprinted toward primary LZ, away from Raven. Drawing the enemy like a magnet pulling iron. Using herself as bait. Kandahar again. Choosing death so others could live. Accepting sacrifice because that's what warriors did. Behind her, the enemy followed. All of them. 30-man force committing entirely. Leaving Nomad and Echo free to extract Raven. She opened fire. Controller bursts. Tactical retreats. Using structures for cover. Constantly moving. 7 minutes became 9, became 12. Kira ran. Bullets stitching ground. Shoulder burning from grazing round. Ammunition dropping. Down to last magazine. When she heard it, rotor blades. But not at primary LZ, at Charlie, exactly where she'd ordered. Female voice on radio, different from Shepard, carrying combat stress but also authority. Wraith, this is Brigadier General Lydia Sterling. I'm bringing you home. Your father didn't raise a quitter. Move your ass, Senior Chief. Kira's mind stuttered. General Sterling, Raven's mother, Army intelligence. What? No time, she changed direction, sprinting with everything left. Enemy realized deception, tried cutting off. Too slow, too late. She vaulted the wall, muscles screaming, across open ground, bullets kicking sand. Helicopter materialized, door guns laying suppressive fire. Nomad's hand reached down. Come on, Wraith. We don't leave family. She grabbed his wrist, felt strength haul her aboard as feet left ground. Helicopter banked hard, climbing into night, compound erupting below. Kira collapsed against bulkhead, breathing hard, blood seeping from wounds, but alive. And beside her, strapped in with Echo monitoring vitals, Raven was alive too. You're insane, Raven managed through tears. You were going to die for me. Kira laughed, sound surprising her. 4 years of weight releasing in pure joy. You did it first. She looked toward cockpit. Besides, I had backup I didn't know about. General Lydia Sterling piloted, silver hair under helmet, hands on controls, and in co-pilot seat, Colonel Raymond Hartford. Understanding crashed over her. This hadn't been Shepard's operation, or rather it had been, but another ran parallel. Counter-operation designed not to eliminate Wraith, but capture those trying. Sterling's voice through headset, calm despite chaos. Senior Chief Thorne, thank you for bringing my son home. Sorry we used him as bait, used you both, but we needed to catch them in the act, needed proof. You used us? Kira's voice flat, exhausted beyond anger. I did. I'll carry that. But 47 operators are alive because we stopped this program tonight, because we exposed the conspiracy, because you walked into the trap knowing it was a trap and trusted we'd pull you out. Helicopter banked west, toward safety. Below, compound burned. CIA team scattering. FBIHRT helicopters converged. Shepard? Kira asked. Captured at primary LZ with 18 team members. Hartford's grim satisfaction. Rest in custody or dead. It's over. Conspiracy exposed. You and Raven are safe. Kira closed eyes, letting words wash over. Safe. After 4 years running, 4 years hiding, 4 years carrying weight she thought would crush her. Safe. She reached for Raven's hand, found it waiting, fingers intertwined, both crying silently, neither needing words. Forgiveness, understanding, bonds that couldn't break even when everything else did. I'm sorry I left you. I'm sorry I made you leave. But we're here now, together. That's all that matters. Isaac Calloway's voice crackled from Fort Bragg, thousands of miles away. Wraith, you copy? I copy, Sergeant. Emotion breaking through professional control. I'm coming home. I knew you would. Compass never fails. Now get back here, we have work to do. 6 months after the mission, Fort Bragg's instructor training facility stood complete. Modern building, state-of-the-art equipment, designed for the Thorn Protocol, already gaining military recognition as a revolutionary approach to special operations training. Kira stood before her first class. 24 students, 8 female, 16 male, arranged in rows, eyes bright with anticipation, respect, hunger for meaning. Corporal Madison Royce sat front row, red hair gleaming in sunlight through windows. The trainee who'd watched Kira's secret revealed, who'd cried understanding women could be warriors without apology. Jesse Graves stood as guest instructor for PTSD awareness. Hands steady, voice strong, demons managed. Proof warriors could face invisible wounds with visible courage. In back row, Private Sophie Cross, 22, Vandal's younger sister, carrying different values, She'd applied specifically to learn from the woman her brother had tried breaking. Proving cross could mean something better. Isaac stood beside Kira as deputy commander. 62, 38 years service, representing generational bridge. His presence sent a message. Old guard respected this, believed in it, would help build it into something that mattered. Lieutenant Benjamin Ashford joined the cadre after medical clearance, teaching tactical patience, survival mindset, mental resilience. Testament that captured didn't mean defeated, that darkness couldn't extinguish warrior spirit. Kira looked at her students, seeing herself reflected, seeing who she'd been before Kandahar, before injury and guilt and hiding. 4 years ago, I thought my service was finished. Her voice carried clear, strong. I thought I'd failed my team, failed my mission, failed everyone who mattered. She paused, meeting eyes across rows. Today I understand. Mission never ends. We're not here teaching you how to kill. We're here teaching why to serve, how to choose right over easy, how to protect without becoming what you fight against. Madison sat straighter, understanding fundamental shift. Real strength isn't dominating others. It's protecting those who cannot protect themselves. That's warrior's code. What separates soldiers from mercenaries, what my father taught me, what I'm teaching you. Isaac stepped forward, weathered face carrying wisdom weight. I've served since '87. Desert Storm, Afghanistan, Iraq, seen every kind of warrior. His voice filled space with earned authority. The best ones aren't the loudest. They're the ones choosing restraint, who know their power but don't abuse it, who understand that legacy isn't what we take, but what we give. He gestured toward Kira. Senior Chief Thorne embodies that. Learn from her, not just tactics and techniques, but philosophy. Understanding that we serve something bigger than ourselves, that integrity matters more than convenience, that the warrior's path is choosing hard right over easy wrong. Class began. Weapons handling, tactical movement, decision-making under pressure. But woven through every lesson was deeper teaching. Honor, integrity, responsibility that came with capability. Understanding that strength without restraint was tyranny, and power without purpose was corruption. That evening, as sun painted Fort Bragg in gold and crimson, Isaac found Kira at the range. Same place her secret was revealed 6 months ago, where everything changed. They stood together in comfortable silence, two warriors separated by decades, but united by understanding. Students trained in background. Madison leading squad drill with fierce competence. Jesse coaching another soldier through breathing techniques. Demons managed enough to help others. Raven teaching tactical patience to group hanging on every word. Old warriors don't retire, Isaac said finally, voice carrying gentle wisdom. We just train next generation to carry the torch forward. Pass the lessons we learned in blood so they don't have to learn them the same way. Kira smiled at familiar exchange. Isaac reached into pocket, pulled out something small, his sealed trident from Desert Storm 91. Tarnished but recognizable, still carrying everything it represented. Keep this until you find someone worthy to pass it to. Someone who understands that the trident isn't decoration, it's covenant, promise to serve something bigger than self. Kira took it, feeling history in her palm, weight of legacy. That's hell of responsibility. You've proven you can handle it. Isaac's gray eyes held hers. Your father would be proud of who you've become. Not just warrior, but teacher, guardian, woman who chose restraint when destruction would have been easier, who chose service when hiding would have been safer. Thank you, Isaac, for everything, for seeing me when I was invisible, for believing when I'd stopped believing in myself, for reminding me that the mission never ends, it just changes shape. Thank you for reminding old soldier that best battles are ones we fight for next generation, for proving that legacy matters more than glory, that teaching matters more than fighting. They watched sun touch horizon, painting world in fire and shadow. Distance, taps began playing, mournful notes drifting across base like benediction, honoring all who'd served, all who'd sacrificed, all who'd chosen duty over comfort. Kira pulled out her father's challenge coin, held it up, inscription catching fading light, service before self. Beside it, she placed Hartford's other coin, the one with Raven's name, two metal pieces carrying legacy weight, promise, hope. Easy days are over, she whispered to gathering darkness. They always were, Isaac replied, but real work building warriors who serve with honor, who choose right over easy, who understand that strength without restraint is tyranny. That's just beginning. As night claimed Fort Bragg, lights appeared across base. Windows glowing warm against darkness. Soldiers finishing duties, heading to barracks, preparing for another day of service. And in training facility, new generation learned what being strong meant. Not through violence or domination, but restraint. Through integrity. Through choosing protection over destruction. Kira Thorne, Senior Chief, SEAL Team 6, call sign Wraith, stood at center. No longer invisible, no longer hiding, no longer running from past transformed into purpose. She was home, truly home. And the mission, real mission of building something better than before, was only beginning. American flag snapped in evening breeze. Stars and stripes visible even in gathering darkness. Symbol of everything they fought for, everything protected, everything sworn to defend, not just nation, but ideal. Promise, legacy passed generation to generation, warrior to warrior, teacher to student. Easy days were over, but important work had just begun. In her pocket, 3 pieces pressed against her heart. Father's coin, Isaac's compass, Raven's memorial. All of it converging in this moment, this place, this purpose. She looked at her students. Tomorrow they'd learn tactics. Tonight they'd learn something more important. That respect was earned through character, not rank. That strength was measured in restraint, not violence. That true warriors serve principles bigger than themselves. Sun disappeared below horizon. Night fell complete. And somewhere in that darkness, new warriors were being born. Not through violence, but through understanding. Not through domination, but through protection. Not through fear, but through honor. The easy days were over. They always had been. But real warriors didn't need easy. They just needed purpose. And Kira Thorne had finally found hers.